I'm Anthony DiLorenzo outside the federal courthouse where we have just wrapped up week 6 in the Sean Diddy Combs trial. Standing outside here with Terry Austin, legal analyst. And Terry, today we heard from Brendan Paul. He was the last personal assistant of Diddy before he was arrested. So tell me, you believe that he was better for the defense than the prosecution, even though he was a prosecution witness?
I do think he was better for the defense. The prosecution called him because they're trying to establish that RICO, the sex trafficking, the transportation to engage in prostitution. But I think Brendan Paul actually came across really well for the defense. When Brian Steele questioned him, it was clear that the drugs that he tried to establish for the prosecution was really minimum. For the 18 months he worked for Sean Combs, he only was involved in drugs a few times.
He said maybe 5 to 10, he clarified.
That is correct.
That's something.
That is something, but it's not as though he, was a trafficker, and that's what he was trying to establish on the defense side, that he was just minimally involved. But I think more importantly, he established that these hotel nights were personal, that it had nothing to do with the enterprise, and that this was a way that Sean Combs relaxed with his girlfriends. So I do think that was important. He also tried to establish on defense that these, hotel nights had nothing to do with any criminal enterprise, that it was just something that Sean was doing on his own personal time.
Well, that's his opinion. It would be up to the jury to see the evidence that corresponds with what he was saying. But I want to take one step back. The media classified Brendan Paul as Diddy's drug mule, but we've seen no evidence of that whatsoever. He was arrested in March of 2024 in Miami with drugs on him at the airport. We saw footage of the body camera arrest of Brendan Paul. So it sort of was sensationalized, really. And his attorney, when he was leaving the courthouse, said today, he's no drug mule.
Well, exactly. And we found out on cross-examination that those drug charges were actually dropped, that it turns out he was sweeping the room, that he put the drugs in his bag. It was a small amount of cocaine. He forgot it was in there, and then that's when the arrest occurred. He didn't, because he was loyal to Sean Combs, he didn't say, oh no, it's not mine. He took the blame for it, but he said on the stand that he had an excellent attorney and that the attorney was able to get those charges dropped. I think he served some community time, but other than that, the charges had been dropped against him.
So we've seen time and time again how the prosecution is bringing up these witnesses that end up flipping the script, maybe inadvertently, and are sort of better for the defense as we wait for this ambulance to go by. Better for the defense. They have to call them? Why are they up there then?
Well, they're up there because they're trying to establish those charges, and they're going to have to get witnesses. One of the things he did do for the prosecution, he did name some names, and there's no question that he put other names like personal assistants, the security guards. He named KK, Christina Coram again, and so he is getting those names back in rotation so that the prosecution, when they do their closing argument, they can say, look, all of these people are involved. Now, whether or not...
Involved how?
That's the good question. Whether or not they're involved in this conspiracy, whether or not they knew what was going on behind closed doors, honestly, I have not seen that beyond a reasonable doubt.
Still, we talked about that earlier this week, and likely he was their last direct witness involved in this case, and you still don't see RICO.
That's right. They did say the other day that they were going to bring someone from law enforcement, but it doesn't sound like they're going to do that now. I think they're going to end, they said, next week.
So right now, we left off this week with an HSI agent who's really putting the people, the places, and the financials, connecting all of those for the jury to establish several different crimes. What are they?
Exactly. So there have been 3 summary witnesses so far for the prosecution, different dates, and they're establishing different things. The one on the stand today was establishing the dates and the travel and the hotel and all of the communications. So he is on there, just like the other summary witnesses, to put that all together for that jury.
Do you think he helped so far?
I do. I think he helped.
In what way?
I think he is helping the jury to put a time frame on what happened between the beginning and the end. So, whether it starts at 2009 and it goes up to 2024, he's putting that in perspective for that jury. He read off some emails, he read off some texts, and they'll be able to look at that and they'll be able to determine, what happened when with whom.
So by showing that several escorts and the girlfriends were flown across the country to hotels, he then was using some of his workers to get the money to pay for them and the hotel stays. What does that exhibit?
That's exactly right. I mean, those exhibits, the underlying exhibits to the summary witnesses are all of those texts and emails. And I'm talking about all three of the summary witnesses. If you remember, they were a little bit dry, but they were all establishing those dates, those times, the American Express receipts, the hotel receipts, the damage that was done. He spent a lot of time today talking about the damage that was done to the hotel rooms because of what was going on with the oil and, the staining of all of the furniture and sheets, etc. So he was establishing that, and the prosecution wants to show that, there was sex trafficking going on. They want to show that there were escorts in those rooms. You heard him talk about Anton. That's one of the escorts. So they are there just to piece that all together for that jury.
So we're going to pick up next week with this HSI agent. They say they're going to go through the rest of the day on Monday, and then the government is going to rest their case after just over 6 weeks of presenting evidence in this case. Then we heard from the defense stand up and say they're only going to be putting on an abbreviated witness list because it would make one think that they feel pretty confident.
I couldn't agree with you more, Anthony. Usually when you have the defense list multiple witnesses and then backtrack on that, it means they think they did well enough on the prosecution's case during the cross-examination. So they're not thinking they need to bring in a whole slew of witnesses. They're thinking that they did well. For instance, they did well on the cross-examination of Brendan Paul. So they're thinking, I'm not going to bring in a whole lot of witnesses. I do think that they are still thinking of bringing a psychologist in to refute what their psychologist said. I mean, we'll see, but he's saying he's got a couple of witnesses and he thinks he's going to be finished. This is Mark Agnifilo, who is the lead attorney for the defense. He's saying he thinks he's going to finish fairly rapidly, and then we'll go to the charges. You heard the judge say, I'm going to give you the draft today. I want you to get that back to me. And when you get that back to me, that'll be it. He'll give the charges, they sum up, and then it goes to the jury.
So bottom line, we could be finished with the case against Sean Combs by Thursday or Friday of next week. Then this case would go to the jury, and the judge wants the deliberations hopefully to be finished by the July 4th holiday. We shall see. That's the latest from here, Lower Manhattan, with Terry Austin. I'm Anthony DiLorenzo. We'll see you next week.